Parties to this all went down during the spring break of my junior year of high school. My school was in a pretty small Iowa town with a district spanning several smaller hamlets. During the summer of 2014, a few friends of mine put together a film club that would make short films and compete in national film festivals against other schools. We were a pretty small group, and found it kind of difficult to get together for any actual filming until spring break of 2015, when we made plans for a little excursion. 4 of us ended up going on the trip myself, and 3 members of the club, Jake, Bill, and Kyle. We ended up choosing to go camping out at Mossy Glen Hollow, a supposedly haunted state park up in northeastern Iowa. Since the 1850s, there have been several murders and suicides out at Mossy Glen, including a few decapitations and our hired hitmen. In the 1930s, being the edgy teens that we were, we jumped at the chance to go hiking and camping somewhere like that. It was within 15 minutes of a small town, so stocking up on food wouldn't be that big of an issue either. So all night screened, we load up 2 of our sedans, program the Jeeps, and off we were for a spring break, camping in some haunted woods. After the first hour and a half on the road, a few red flags began to fly after the last large town before getting way out in the boondocks. My phone's data signal cut out, and the Jeeps randomly changed directions on us. Since none of us had any idea where the hell we were at, or where Mossy Glen was supposed to be, we didn't have much choice but to blind follow the new route. Here's a little something about Iowa land distribution, especially up north because the hills can get someone. Even at places, you end up with portions of land that are too steep or too rocky to farm, or small flat basins that are surrounded by steep slopes, that it makes farming incredibly difficult. Over the course of several decades, you end up with farms buying a plot of farmland with patches of unworkable land stuck in between. Rather than buy this land and pay property tax on it for several centuries, as these farms stay in the family for generations, the land either remains purchased and public repurchased by the state, or donated to the state or DNR. Many of these plots get designated as state parks or preserves surrounded by private property, such as soon as we found out, Must See Glen Hollow. This explains the private property signs we saw by the lake, which was land purchased right next to the unusable older covered creek. This is a bit important for the sake of the story, and now that you understand it, we will dive back in once we're firmly in the middle of nowhere. Our Jeeps took us off the paved highways and onto gravel roads. At this point, you typically would see the usual brown Iowa DNR signs designating that you were near a state park. But there were none. There weren't even any tree clumps to indicate that you were near some sort of forest. Red flag number 2. Another 10 minutes or so into the drive and the gravel road soon turns into a dirt road. Then a low maintenance road. Then a Class B minimum maintenance road with Iowa's dedication to road preservation. This basically means that somebody probably came by and took a peek in the 90s and promptly forgot about its existence. As we came around the last hilly bend that the GPS shows on our route, we see a farmhouse with a large machine shed, with no lights or activity around either, and no cars in the driveway. A bit weirded out that our house could be right next to a state park. We slow down and keep rolling. To our dismay, however, the road dissolves into a mess of washed tractor tire gouges from last fall's harvest. We stop the cars as far down as we can pass without getting hung up on a frozen rut and unpack some of our equipment. The road gradually narrows, snakes down the middle of a field, and turns down into the small but very thick clump of woods at the bottom of a wide ravine. We get out and hike down the gradually steepening slope and take in the scenery. At first, everything looks like a pretty damn cool set to film that. There are several lime outcrops hanging off the hillside, a footpath with some picturesque tree overhang, and even a few bird sounds that made an unseasonal return from wintering down south. We can all hear some water running, but can't identify a source from the trail looking off in any direction. All that we see was a seemingly endless sea of trees. At the bottom of the hill was a small pond in the middle of a grassy clearing with a fence. As we approached the fence, we noticed a sign, "Private property, keep out." Bill checks his watch and realizes it's almost time for dinner. So we trek back to our vehicles and hook up the Jeeps. The nearest town over was a little place called Edgewood that had several diners and a gas station to load up on supplies for the week. We brought some canned food, but not much beyond that. As we got to town, we realized that Edgewood was a lot smaller, that we had expected less than 900 people it would turn out. Everyone knows everyone in these small towns. So we got several weird looks when 4 strangers rolled up with plates from the other side of the state. Kyle thought to ask the cashier and a few people at the gas station about mostly Glen Hollow, and why the only route in was through some dude's field on a busted down dirt road. To our surprise, nobody had even heard of a place called Mossy Glen, nor could they figure out why the hell 4 high schoolers suddenly rolled into town looking for the place. Red flag number 3. We shrug it off as just a few crazy locals and take us back down the dirt trail as we round the corner, back near the farmhouse. We notice all the lights are off and nobody seems to be home. I suggest that we leave some sort of note on the house door that we're going to be parking on this side of the road near their place, just to be safe. It's starting to get late in the day, and being this far out in the country, it wouldn't be unheard of to come face to face with a shotgun when the homeowner finds our cars, since the road is impassable from that point onwards. Parking there wouldn't realistically block anyone off the road, and would still technically be on public land. We hike back down the wooded trail and start scouting for a place to set up camp for the night, making sure to be on the public side of the fenced pond area. We discover that the sea of trees that we saw earlier was actually quite a bit thinner when seen from below. In fact, the dirt path led to a decently sized clearing, with a creek and small waterfall cutting through the limestone deposits. None of us could believe that we had missed such a thing a few hours earlier. When Bill comes to a realization, he disappears around the corner, back into the trees, and emerges at the top of the trail, not thinking much of it. We take some pictures of the large moss-covered boulders and get some pretty nice scenic shots. We find a place to make camp, and everything is going great until we approach the waterfall just before the waterfall. Such a clearing without any large boulders or rocks, and an odd arrangement of logs once sat horizontal, supported at each end by 2 piles of rocks in front. Such a crude stone circle with a pile of burnt logs inside the fire pit with a bench. Though a bit of a surprise at first, we shrug it off as some weekend project that the people up at the house put together. After all, with such a cool place, just a short walk from home, why not? They have a similar fire pit set up at home, so I'm not overly concerned. Hey, what the hell is this? Kyle yells it from a boulder a few yards ahead on it set ablaze. Orange beanie, a single gardening glove, and an empty can of beer. Oh, and a stick of deodorant. I had seen some serious wear. Looking closer at the beer, can we realize that it must have been opened fairly recently? Foam is still fresh in the bottom of the can, and it had a few me smell bewildered by what the hell we just found. Jake starts looking around the other side of the boulders upstream of the items. Holy shit. There's a cave, he shouts back to us. Later, he told us the cave was large enough to comfortably fit a person inside, and that more disturbingly, he saw some red fabric inside as well. Before he can get a good look around, Kyle calls the 3 of us back over with a sense of urgency. He speaks very quietly to us and indicates that we shouldn't jump back. He whispers, pointing urgently down at his feet. Sure enough, in the modern leaves is a blue bottle of Suave shampoo right next to the creek. At this point, we're all adequately freaked out and ready to call our little soiree quits. Bill remains pretty sure that this is just junk left behind by the people at the house after a weekend and a few too many bush lights. But things don't just add up to me. There's one detail that I've been leaving out at this point. The day before this part of Iowa got some heavy rain, which contributed to the mud situation on the dirt road and on the trail with the combination of wind and rain. The items on the rocks would have shown some signs of being wet, if not then displaced entirely. Also, the air was pretty cold as it is every year around this time. No getting above the mid-40s for the whole week. Then everything starts to click sunny. Whoever drank the beer and left the shampoo, hat, glove deodorant must have done this sometime this morning. The fire pit also had fresh char marks on the rocks, and the wood had not been wet for a while, meaning it must have been lit last night at the earliest. The small cave would have provided enough shelter from the rain to stay dry without the freezing temperatures all through the day. Whoever was using shampoo out here must have had little other choice to do so. If it was the homeowners, they would have had to be seriously masochistic to bathe in the shallow, freezing, rocky creek rather than at home. If it wasn't, then we likely weren't alone. Right now. Whoever left these things out left in a hurry, and if they were here 4 hours ago, they would have been able to see us on the trail cliff long before we even knew they were down here. Remembering the arrangements of rocks on the stream, they could have even been leaving their camp just as we were coming down the dirt trail. As I processed this, I started to look around at my surroundings and realized that the small area was bordered by the thick trees on the trail side. Several sets of huge boulders on the pond side and limestone cliffs everywhere else, due to the tree, rock, and hill cover. You could light a fire in the pit at night, and no one around you would even know. The illusion of being able to see up the dirt trail from the camp, but not downplayed in reverse, from the cliffs. If you were wearing brown or green, you could easily see down from the rocks, on top of the camp below, while blending in with the trees above. Coming to these realizations, I noticed something else. Something more sinister. The birds and small animals that were previously heard are now quiet. Aside from the soft babble of the creek, the entire place is completely silent. As I start to explain this to the rest of the group, I see the wheels turning in their heads as well. Jake starts to head back to the small caves when a rustling up on the limestone ridge catches our attention. Something large was shifting around up there. Something that apparently didn't want Jake to see what was in the cave. We all look up the whatever or whoever made the noise as it started shuffling down the ridge towards the makeshift camp because of the high cliff. The only way down to us would be going all the way back down to the pond and then double back up the stream. Realizing this and almost crapping ourselves at how open we were, we book it back down the stream, up the dirt path across the field and back to our cars on the drive back to Edgewood. We all try and process what the hell just happened. I take a look at a satellite map, and the only really accessible way to the cliff where we heard the noise would be to walk up there from the pond. It was too craggy to approach from the adjacent field to the east. Whatever made that noise would have been large, and the deer getting up there wouldn't necessarily be out of the question. But I doubt it. It would have had to have been some incredible timing to have started moving around just as Jake began looking at the cave and whatever red fabric was inside. Kyle found a report of an escaped convict from a local prison a few weeks ago, and was convinced that it was his camp that we found. Though we were all doubtful at best of this idea to satisfy his concerns, we agreed to report the strange thing we found to the police anonymously, since we all really wanted to get home at this point. None of us followed up with them, and I doubt anything came of it. The small, close-knit town police department gets a report of strange sightings for some stranger. The same day that 4 high schoolers roll up and park outside a farmer's house for a few hours and then book it out. Doesn't exactly spell high-threat criminal activity to me. Still, things still just don't seem to add up. Whoever came running down that cliff, if indeed it was a who wanted to keep whatever was inside that cave, hid it, but not enough to actually fight for decently tall and able teenagers. We figured he just wanted to scare us off since the noises seemed to stop once we reached the dirt path. I thought it odd that someone living out in the woods with something seemingly to hide would set up shop in a state park. That is, until I checked my GPS again. That little reroute that it took us on was an old entrance to the park that had been cut off by the purchase of the lake area, sometime between the records used for Google's navigation being updated. And that day, the current entrance to the park is about 2 miles north of where the GPS sent us, thinking it was a faster road. The place we were at was still public land for sure, but not quite what we pictured. So dude in Mossy Glen Hollow, let's not meet again. I am a 32-year-old man, yet as I say this in broad daylight, it still haunts me to the point that merely thinking about it all in this case, sharing the memory is enough to send chills down my body and make me feel like a terrified child. I have only shared this experience with a handful of people over the past 10 years, because of how terrifying of an experiment science it was. But I feel like it can be therapeutic, to get it off my chest and share it with others. Perhaps others have had similar experiences to tell this story and to give it justice. I have to tell you of an experience that happened 3 years before the terrifying encounter. Buckle up. This will be long.